you, Angela. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll see if this works. If not, I'll just project. It's really nice to be here. Thank you again for inviting me. Thank you, Alice. Thank you to the board for having me. And congratulations on your 40th anniversary. It is truly remarkable. I think I heard 300 properties on 20 different islands. It's just amazing what you've accomplished. I want to, right off the bat, stress that I'm very fond of the San Juan Islands. This July that's coming up will be 25 years since my first visit. I was a young summer associate at a law firm in Portland, Oregon, way back then, I guess the summer of '94. And at that time, they still wanted to sort of wine and dine their summer associates to say, this is the lifestyle you can have. And so one of the partners had a sailboat. I could see it from here. It was on the other side of where the ferry is. And we spent 3 or 4 days sailing around the San Juan Islands. It was truly magical, and I can truly understand why you're so in love with this place. I also had a chance about 15 years ago to spend a week at the Friday Harbor Labs as part of a program I was in. And then, of course, in the last couple of years, the Trust has been very kind and generous and welcomed me with open arms. We had a wonderful event at the Westcott Shellfish Company a year and a half ago, and also a nice event in Seattle. So anyway, I love being here. It's a real pleasure, so thanks again for including me. What I'd like to do today is just cover a few topics. I'd like to give you a little background on the Land Trust movement, a little bit of explanation of what the Land Trust Alliance does, and through that help you understand some of what's happening with the greater community. And then I'll wrap up with some general trends that I'm seeing around private land conservation. So as Angela stressed, the Land Trust Alliance is the voice of land trusts in America. We are the National Association of Land Trusts. We have 1,000 land trust members, and that's all the way from your smallest all-volunteer land trusts, and we have a lot of those, all the way up to land trusts of your size and to the biggies, the national organizations like the Trust for Public Land and the Nature Conservancy. It's our job to represent all of those land trusts one way or the other and to serve all the different segments within that. What I want you to come away with today is that you are part of a very vibrant movement and community. Land trusts in America have saved to date more than 56 million acres. That's more than twice the size of the national park holdings in the lower 48. Yes. Truly remarkable. Land trusts in America enjoy the support of about 5 million supporters. And every day they are saving the equivalent of 5 or 6 new central parks. And I think that's, again, something to celebrate. So you're part of that. You're a very important part of that. And so the job of the Land Trust Alliance is to make sure land trusts can be as effective as possible. And we do 3 things that I'll run through that really explain our role. The first is we do capacity building for land trusts. This is all based off of what are called land trust standards and practices. Those are the ethical and technical guidelines for how to run a land trust here in the country. We do those in conjunction with our land trust community. And as you've already heard about today, if you're a land trust member, you're supposed to aspire to abide by those standards. But once you can show that you're actually doing that, you can become accredited through our independent Land Trust Accreditation Commission. I want to say a heartfelt thank you for being accredited. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm sure there's many board members that do not relish those times. But every land trust that goes through it says it was worth it. Every land trust that goes through it says they're better off for it. So thank you for doing it initially and for the renewal. It's been a very successful program. 422 of our members are now accredited. If you look at the acreage protected by land trusts in America, 80% of that acreage is held by an accredited land trust. So you can see we've come a long way. In addition to standards and accreditation, we do all kinds of things to train staff at land trusts, to help land trusts be better organizations, one of which we have something called the Wentworth Leadership Program, and it's not preemptively named after Keith, but I want to stress, so what we look for with that program is we're looking for executive directors that show great promise or actually have already shown that they're true leaders. And we put them through a 2-year process, and they're with a cohort of other executive directors that becomes almost like family to them, and it really helps them throughout their career. And the second year of that leadership training, the board president or chair joins that. So I'm very pleased to announce, if Angela you haven't already, that Angela will be part of our leadership program in just 2 weeks. will be aptly named the Wentworth Leadership Program because Keith will be there in it. So we do all those kinds of things to try to build the capacity of land trust. And then the second thing we do, and perhaps the most important thing, is we try to make sure land trusts have the resources they need to do their work. This is all about money, and this is all about advocacy, especially at the federal level. There are really two ways that we make sure that land trusts have the resources they need. The first is to look at federal appropriations, federal money flowing to buy land or buy easements. The Farm Bill, I don't know how much people think about the Farm Bill here, but the Farm Bill is the single largest source of money for land trusts doing land deals. The Farm Bill just was approved again at the end of last year. We were very successful. We had all kinds of good provisions put in there for land trusts, including something called the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. We raised the funding by $250 million a year, so a big success. We also have the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Hopefully many people here know about that. And you might recall that just 2 months ago, that was permanently reauthorized. A huge accomplishment. Now that was done, of course, with a huge consortium of organizations, and the Land Trust Alliance was just part of that. And it is permanently reauthorized, but it still means every year we have to fight for the money that will be allocated or spent through that program. It can spend up to $900 million a year. Sounds like a big number. It's roughly in the 400 range. We need to bring that up. The other thing I want to emphasize when we're talking about resources for land trusts at the federal level is the federal tax incentive for conservation easement donations. Our group of land trusts, meaning the 1,000 members of the Alliance, on average, and by our estimate, generate $1 billion a year of federal tax deductions using that incentive. Let's say you use a marginal tax rate of 40%. That's $400 million, if you think of it, coming from the federal treasury going into land. It's a very important tool that we have. It's not the easiest thing to administer. The IRS is throwing up problems all the time, so we're fighting on behalf of land trusts. The third thing I want to emphasize that we do for land trusts is we protect them and we build their resilience. We have a conservation defense department that looks at tax court cases, that looks at policymaking in all jurisdictions, and looks for things that will make it difficult for land trusts to do their work, and we fight on your behalf. The next word I'm going to say is something I hope a word that most of you recognize, which is terra firma. Terra firma is the insurance company we created from whole cloth just for land trusts. It gives them protection to actually enforce, as they need to, the ability to, I guess I should say, it allows them to enforce the conservation restrictions on their lands. I believe the trust has used the program well, and we are thrilled, actually, that land trusts are using that program. It's been another huge success. We've had more claims than we thought we'd have, but a lower payout. To us, that is success. It means that land trusts are not scared. They are, in fact, using this tool to protect themselves. We're going to need this kind of tool more and more as we have owners transferring property. Let's say a land trust convinces someone to donate a conservation easement. Everything's well and good. The underlying fee owner eventually sells that interest to somebody else. And then the new landowners often don't want to abide by conservation easement restrictions. So this is when something like terra firma can really kick in. We also have landowners next door to a lot of protected properties that like to do things like cut down trees for views and things like that. Again, terra firma has been very successful, and we're pleased about that. I mentioned the word resilience. One of the ways we build the resilience of land trusts is focused on climate change. I know it's a sensitive topic, but an important topic. We created a land and climate program just 2 years ago. One of the things we're trying to do is help land trusts use the most current science, so when they're doing their conservation planning, they can say, these are the lands that will actually be more resilient to climate change. Let's go protect those. The Nature Conservancy actually created a new type of resilient science that looks at the physical characteristics of the land so that no matter what happens with precipitation or temperature, you can tell which parts of the landscape will likely be most resilient, especially for biodiversity and wildlife. One thing I want to announce today, I don't know if you've heard about this, but the Land Trust Alliance has just announced and started a new program called the Pacific Northwest Resilient Landscapes Initiative. We're not terribly good with acronyms or short names. A similar program was running up through 2015 through the Nature Conservancy. The Doris Duke Charitable Foundation believes in that resilient science I just mentioned, and they move land capital to land trusts in the Pacific Northwest if you're using that science. That program wrapped up, and now we're going to run the new version of it. But one of the things I want to make clear to the group today, because I think you might have some insights for me, is for the first time, the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation said, we want to do this program, we want land capital to go to land trusts, but we'd like others to sort of contribute to the pot. So they've had this partnership with the Seattle Foundation, the Idaho Community Foundation, and the Oregon Community Foundation. And so the objective there is to bring money to bear, perhaps through donor-advised funds, to support the land trust community throughout Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. So I'm hoping that you have those types of relationships and connections, you might look for support or provide support there as well. Okay, so that's just in a nutshell what the Land Trust Alliance does, and it gives you a feel for some of the issues we're all dealing with. And I want to wrap up with just 3 general trends I'm seeing that you might find of interest. The first is a very positive trend that I like to tell the story about, which is our community is poised for continued great success. And why do I say that? Well, it's the very nature of the work that we all do. It's inherently local and community-based. You can find the passion here. The partisanship that we see at the federal level really isn't as present. You can find as a community the wherewithal and the desire to protect a place. And you know that you're serving your community exceptionally well. Our work, of course, is voluntary. We're not the government. We're not saying you shall not develop this or you shall contribute this. Instead, we are appealing to landowners to use their private property rights to save land. And think of how often we do that, and there's charitable intent behind those donations. Landowners regularly giving up very valuable interests in land. All of this adds up to the fact that land conservation, or private land conservation at least, really is nonpartisan. I'm on Capitol Hill all the time, so is a lot of the Alliance staff. It doesn't matter if we're going to a Republican or a Democrat's office. We can talk about private land conservation. You just might have to speak about it in different value systems, but everybody loves land. And so that universal love of land, again, is why I think we're set for more success. And the final thing I want to emphasize is the enduring quality of our work. We actually have the audacity to talk about perpetuity. It's kind of an amazing thing that we talk about. But when you talk about that on Capitol Hill, people listen to you like, wow, you are really delivering for the American people. So in that sense, we're doing great. But I want to talk about 2 other trends that I see that really get to that perpetuity piece. In my 3 years on the job, and I was in this field as a funder before this, but 3 years in this role, what I've really come to understand is that conservation is not a one and done. It doesn't end the day that the conservation easement is signed or the land is transferred and feed. That's just the beginning. And I know so many people in this room know this. And as Angela talked about, that second phase of the land trust community's evolution is around stewardship. All land trusts I talk to struggle with finding money for stewardship. And you also talk to a lot of working land owners, so the people who have the underlying feed. They still want to ranch, they still want to farm, they still want to harvest timber sustainably. Long story short, we have to find a way to have a stream of income going to land trusts and or landowners to steward the land the way we want, to make sure we have clean water, habitat for wildlife, all kinds of things that you might want. And I just want to focus on one area in particular, and that's carbon sequestration. I mentioned climate earlier in terms of a threat to land trusts, but it's also an opportunity. The most recent science shows that natural climate solutions, meaning the ability of soil and vegetation to absorb and store carbon, is actually quite profound. The work we do is actually a huge part of the climate mitigation puzzle. And I hope everyone can come away feeling that today. It's really important that you do. But we have to find a way then to make sure that land trusts and landowners receive compensation to manage their lands in a way that sequesters more carbon. I'll note that at the Alliance, one of the things we're looking at this very month is how we can help land trusts participate in carbon offset markets. I'm going to lose the audience in about 2 seconds if I keep going down that path. But what that's all about is that things like the California cap and trade system actually allows land trusts around the country to do smart forestry projects, and they get paid for doing that through the California system. A lot of land trusts, however, have small parcels that are too small for the current market. So what the Alliance is looking at is, can we aggregate smaller parcels so that land trusts like yours can participate? So hopefully we'll go down that path, and we'll be talking to our board in just a few weeks about that. So the final thing I want to talk about today is perhaps the most important thing that the Alliance is trying to elevate and grasp at this time, which is we have to make land conservation, land and land trusts relevant to far more people. I talked about that the community of land trusts in the States has about 5 million supporters. That's great, but that's a sliver of the population. And that sliver tends to be very uniform in terms of affluence, race, age, you name it. We need to broaden our support if we're going to have a future. And we're going to have power at the ballot box. We're going to have power on Capitol Hill. We need to find a way to reach people in cities. We need to find a way to reach young people. We need to find a way to reach people of color. So the Alliance is determined to do this. And we're going to do this in 2 ways. The first is what we call a relevance campaign. This is going to be a national social media type of campaign, helping people understand the value of land conservation, and land trusts, and ask people to do things. Go out and visit land trust land. Go out and vote for the following things that can support land trusts. And finally, go out and give money to land trusts. So we will do our best to do that at a national level through a sophisticated digital campaign. But the flip side of that is what I want to finish on today, which is we have been encouraging land trusts now for a number of years to fully embrace community conservation. Now, Angela already mentioned this as sort of the next phase in the evolution of our community, and she's correct. Community conservation is about every land trust looking at its service territory and saying, who isn't currently engaged in this type of work with us? Who isn't being served? And how do we make that happen? And so I want to commend you for having one of your pillars in your new strategic plan. One of your C's is connect. That's exactly what the Alliance has been pushing people to do, and we're so proud and impressed that you have done that. It will not be the easiest thing to do, but we are here to support you because it absolutely is essential to the health of our community and our movement. With that, I think I'll wrap up. I'm happy to do any Q&A on anything I mentioned or anything I didn't mention, and we'll go from there. So thank you.